Can I get it started still, Chip?
Yeah, it's sometimes it asks for password, sometimes it doesn't. It says it's
It
setting up
says
the
it's being
meeting.
set now.
They asked me to approve
It's
join YouTube.
Aaron's just joining here. Okay.
Still, Chip? Hi, Aaron.
Yeah. Sometimes it asks for password, sometimes it doesn't. We're live. It says we are now live. We're live. We're live.
Okay, so it is 2:02 by my watch, and we have all four town representatives on the committee present, plus Aaron Townsend. So we have a quorum, and I'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. We have no members of the public present, so we will skip the public input. The next item on the agenda is to discuss the budget workshop presentation and the discussion that followed with the Board of Selectmen on Wednesday. But maybe before we do that, welcome back, Aaron. I wasn't at the school budget presentation, but I think Chip was there. I don't know whether Jay was or not, but I heard it went well, and I guess I would ask you if there's follow-up things from that. Your budget looks great, as we discussed before you left on
Right.
school break.
Right.
Is your budget pretty stable? Are you in good shape? You've got, I think, one more meeting with the Board
Right.
of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Do you is there anything that significantly might change?
No, nothing major. We did have, since that workshop, we got a notice from our insurance providers of a potential rate increase that was above what we were anticipating. So we've had to kind of escalate those, kind of the assumptions we have built in for that. But that's just some fine tuning at this point. The big picture numbers are kind of in place. So so yeah, we have the another conversation workshop with the select board on the 2nd, and then our school committee is scheduled to vote to approve it on the 15th. So
Okay.
we're in pretty good shape.
I
Yeah,
didn't I didn't look at the items that you guys reserved for. Were there any significant uh changes there?
No, we're kind of waiting. No, significant changes to the reserve accounts. I mean, we were not,
Yeah.
kind of planning at this juncture on kind of accessing any of those and just letting those kind of remain as is. We're looking forward to getting the audit results from the past year so we can, see what's left in terms of undesignated funds and make decisions based on that in terms of how we'll address that. We anticipate there'll be some. But that sounds like from the discussion at the workshop that that'll be in April at some point. So.
Okay. All right. Is there anything the Finance Committee can do to support you?
Well, I mean, I think I am learning a little bit from your all's work, just in terms of because we, as I've shared, we're doing this kind of, had initiated this parallel process about our facilities maintenance plan in general. And within that, and I know I mean, we have a couple of significant capital assets, but the building being the primary one, the bus probably being the next highest value one. But then we have other pieces like the generator and things like that that ultimately are not huge dollar value. Um, but I think understanding kind of the methodology and, as you guys are kind of talking through on the town side of what we should be kind of allocating to reserves over time. I know you had sent a figure at one, or somebody had sent, there had been some kind of estimation of a potential figure to ensure we had enough kind of reserve, for our capital needs kind of over a period of time. So I think that's part of what I'm taking away from this. I mean, my general sense is we're in a pretty healthy place with our reserves overall. That's how the school committee's certainly feeling. Part of why we feel like, everything, we don't need to make any capital investments out of the operating budget because of the state of our reserves. So I think just aligning, as this work continues to play out at that level, that we have or it maybe, if it's appropriate, using the similar methodology to be thinking about what we should be holding in reserve, recognizing our little piece sits under the broader municipal umbrella, and just making sure we're aligned around that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that was a big piece of, it was an important piece of the discussion we had with the select board on Wednesday, that we're doing all this work on the existing assets. We don't even have an updated list yet. There are assets, we're trying to get that by Jay interviewed the public works guys and the transfer station, and Jay and I interviewed the firehouse people. But just from what we purchased from 2023, that information has to be in the financial record somewhere. We need to get that added. But I think the end of that discussion was that the finance committee has to have a work plan for the year that integrates with the budget process. And part of that, what the finance committee can help shepherd, is the review of the capital assets and the capital spending plan. But at the end of the day, a department or a committee really needs to be held responsible for that. Like the public works, as part of their process, needs to review their asset list and say, yeah, well, it's all good, except this truck we thought we needed in 5 years, we probably needed it in 4. And the price to buy it isn't $80,000, it's $120,000 or whatever. Yeah. So, and I think that aligns with what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel like that's what we're building on the school side with our facilities. We have kind of just the actual maintenance plan. What's the, kind of schedule of maintenance. But then second page that kind of lists out, our higher value capital assets and their date, what the potential replacement cost is, and those kinds of things.
Great. Good.
So you guys can see the screen now of the school capital reserve 144,045.
Just so you know, Chip, I can't see anything. I have no video in either direction.
Oy. Well, you want to try signing in again? I don't know.
I could.
Yeah, once
but everything else is working fine. So.
Yeah, well, sometimes those monkeys, you never know.
I'll try again.
Yeah, try again. Yeah, I thought your Aaron, was the presentation was good. I missed, but I thought the time was different. But it did seem well received. I mean, you're delivering. You're yes. Talking about over $800,000 savings or reductions. So obviously that has a huge net effect. On this here, I have school capital reserve. And that's where I plugged in the 3%. I think you gave us the 3% of the building cost of 1678.
I think that actually might have been me, Chip, that said, in the literature, just a quick review, 3% might be a number.
Is there a number, Aaron, that you think is 3% realistic? Should it be, that's $50,000? Is that too much? That's more than you have in the budget, I think.
Yeah, we're not allocating anything currently in our budget to the reserve. The practice, as I understand it, has been when we get the undesignated funds, that it's usually based on those that decisions are made in terms of additional contributions to the town or to the school reserves. So it hasn't been a line item in the operating budget in having a regular contribution, if that's the right language. But that being said, we have been, or at least the past few years, there have been contributions, I think in excess of that. It was 75,000 last year.
So there is a line item in your budget that talks about maintenance, just overall building maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. You don't happen to remember that amount, do you? I can find it.
But just one sec. Yeah, I have the budget doc up.
Okay.
Facilities maintenance, repair and maintenance, $7,500.
Okay. Okay. So that's already getting picked up. I have that coming out of the school reserve because as we were feeling our way along here and understanding it, but you already have that in your budget.
Yeah,
So
that's
that,
7,500.
so
And
this,
then, go
yeah.
ahead.
Okay. So this really here is, yeah. Okay. So we don't need to carry it in or account for it as, okay. You already have it. Yep.
Yeah. And then just in terms of, assume just from, because it's, reflected in the Machias statement, there's the school capital reserve, and then the additional reserve accounts that are designated in there. There's transportation, playground, yeah, special education. Okay, yeah, you have all those. Great.
So just quickly, again, we're just picking up speed on understanding it. I'm doing my best. School special education reserve is for what?
Additional unanticipated special education costs.
Oh, okay. Transportation, as it says.
Right, that's what we used, and that actually probably a more updated statement will reflect a reduction there because we had the van died and we got the new van. But that's been for those capital expenditures. So we bought the new bus and new
Okay.
van this year out of those.
Okay. Tuition is for tuitions that we have to pay to.
Right, again, unanticipated, a family moves in with middle schooler and high schoolers, and we have to pay for them to go to Yarmouth. something.
Okay. And school playground. Okay.
Yeah.
I think those are all.
So
Okay.
our Yarmouth tuition is, the number I remember is 15,000, but that might be a
Yeah, that's a
several
good
year-
work. That's a good working number. Yeah, it's about 15,000. Mhm.
Okay.
That's what it was for this year. It'll
Yep.
increase for next year, but
Okay.
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 Any other questions for Aaron or anything else for us, Aaron?
no, I don't think so. I mean, I think I'm, again, yeah, trying to.
Hey, there's Jim. All right. That's Jim. Look at that. Well, it's like, when in doubt, unplug it. Curse at it
Yeah,
first or later and then unplug it.
4 tries.
Okay.
Who
Okay.
knows?
So maybe we'll move on to item 2 of the budget. Discuss the budget workshop presentation and identify follow-up tasks.
And just before, as you guys go on, I need to make the 2:30 vote or 2:50
Sure.
vote. Sorry, today.
Okay.
So
Sure.
I'm gonna hop off in a little bit, but
Yeah.
Appreciate all the
Well-
work you guys are doing.
Well, we appreciate your
I don't-
plugging in and learning with us and educating us. So
If we
Thank
have, you've been able to get around Basecamp. So if we have any questions, we'll just contact you on Basecamp.
Yep, that sounds good. Yeah, I
And
see the
email.
emails come through and get the notifications and everything. So
And you can, by the way, Aaron, just to refresh everyone's memory, you can turn off on the bottom of any email you receive, unplug me from this link. You can still go back and see it later on. But if you find you're incorrectly linked into something else, we're talking about floats or something, just unplug it and
no,
and-
that's okay. Yeah, it's been fine. Yeah,
Okay.
that's been overwhelming. Anything. So thank you, Chip.
okay. Jim, were you able to listen to the Wednesday discussion and hear
I
most of it?
watched you guys till 7:45.
Oh, good. Was it good? Was it a good show?
I thought you all did great.
pretty exciting. Yeah, I know.
I did come away with some views about what the select board wants from us, which I sounded a little like throwing us in front of the wolves, but anyhow.
Well, good. Tell us what you thought they wanted from us.
Well, I hear them wanting 2 scenarios from us, which is going to require us to consolidate a lot of information. But I think they want a scenario that says if revenues grow at the same rate as expenses, whatever rate we decide that is, in what years will we have how much surplus cash to borrow how much money? And then they'd like us to say, and here's the list we'd spend the money on. But I think you did a good job of asking them to produce that list. And do we believe the list we got from Bob Ernest, I guess is the question, because it seemed to have a priority on it. So it would be how far down that list can we go? And then the second is scenario 2, which says if we raise taxes a little bit more than expenses go up, and we'd have to pick some number, like 1% a year or 2% a year for some number of years, how much more money could we borrow? That struck me as what they were asking us for.
Yeah.
Therefore, how far down the list can we go before we run out of bond money? That's
Yeah.
what I heard in the end.
Okay, Jay, Chip,
Well, a couple of things that I took away, particularly after reading Bob's capital project list, which in some ways was very obvious, in some ways kind of surprised me. Obviously, Ralph Monroe has a lot of work to do in how he approaches things, because his 2 items are on the bottom of the list. And I assume everybody's gotten this list.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Ranks Stone Wharf first. I was also curious to see that some of the numbers were less than I expected from what they had been talking about.
Maybe, but Jay, I was struck that there were bans on there, which struck me in some cases as if it's alternative construction projects.
Mm-hmm.
so Aaron, did you get a copy of the list we're talking about that Bob put together?
He's muted right now.
Okay,
Is it the one you posted on Basecamp?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I have it in Excel in my laptop, and if you total up the low numbers, they total up to 11,600,000, and if you total up the high numbers, they total up to 30,750,000. So they're big numbers any way you look at it.
Yep.
Right.
Which is why I think the 2 scenarios become something they're looking to us to give them. So
I also took away the idea that they would very much like to be able to turn around and say, well, this all is going this way because the finance committee says so, not your good board of the selectmen.
exactly.
There was clearly that in it. But I wasn't able to open it, but where the operational budget, which is basically the expense budget minus the capital. Did we know where that's is that up from last year? Do we know?
I think it was within a few $1,000s of it. So, I mean,
Oh, it's nothing. Okay.
it was, and the other thing is when I mentioned to Aaron, I mean, they're as, and I didn't see, again, I haven't gone through it that closely, but I saw a lot of, I'll call it school savings, in the budget, but I didn't see, the $800,000, and it could just be my lack of understanding how the process works. But at any rate, I mean, that's a huge savings. That's a $10 million bond based on Jay's, quick figure. What's going to be there next year? I don't know, but it's an awful lot. So I just don't want people to be lulled into, well, that bond's only going to end once. And so is that going to continue to be a savings? I don't know.
Quick question for me. Who is SWAG?
That's a WAG is a wild ass guess.
Okay.
And
So this
S
isn't- This is
is
someone
a
else agreeing with
is
Bob.
a studied
just-
wild ass guess. I don't know.
Okay,
It's a
but
Bob
this
Ernest-
isn't someone else agreeing with Bob. This is
No.
just Bob's list.
right.
Yeah. And
Right.
I heard at that meeting $10 million for the Stone Wharf. So in some case, I mean, we're chasing these numbers are just, I don't think we can put a lot of work into them right now. I mean, as they are, okay, they've got, I think it's really important for the people to know, as when you guys do your presentation to the public, it will be really important for people to understand the magnitude of some of these things. But as far as doing any hard numbers on it, I mean, none of these are solid numbers.
Well, is GEI going to give us some numbers?
Well, I think Carol and Bob are going to ask them for numbers. So
Yeah.
I hope in the next couple weeks, we'll get an updated version of this list that'll be collaboratively produced by Bob and Carol with some GEI input. And then the priorities should reflect what the Board of Selectmen have come up with, because they've discussed it and they had their, they had a
Retreat.
retreat. Yeah, that's the right word. They had a retreat and discussed priorities, et cetera. And then my takeaway was they were fairly well aligned. So,
I was going to suggest one other thought from the meeting, which is we may need to give them guidelines of suggesting if a cost is below a certain level, then it ought to be handled through a reserve account, and only items above a certain level should be bonded.
Yeah, that's on our task list, I think, is set up some kind of a decision template for those things.
Yeah.
But you could just give them a quick number, to walk around with, like Jay's number of borrowing.
I mean, I'd take $1 million if an item isn't
Thanks,
$1
Aaron.
million.
We'll see ya.
If an item were not $1 million, I'd say don't bond it. I mean, that's just my rule, but for instance, because otherwise we're bonding a fire truck.
Yeah, I agree with you that there should be some level, minimum for bonding.
And as you were saying, Jay, it has to fit some depreciable criteria too, so you could bond it for 25 years.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I did. I went through after this, and I've got sort of what we're paying, what our current, including the school, debt service requirements are. And in 29, they cut their less than 50% of what they are now. And then it declines from there down to the point where basically the only thing left on the list is broadband. And since we really don't know what's going to happen there, so what I was trying to look at was what kind of a time frame would you want to start borrowing in? And, using, for instance, I use $7.5 million for the stone pier. I guess that's one of Bob's swags. That costs you a little less than $500,000 a year. If we reduced some of the reserve fund deposits, that's very easy to do. Starting in 2029, when we paid off some of the other debt, you basically wouldn't even feel it, or feel it very little in the tax increases. So I guess a couple of things we need to do are one, take a look at when we would start, after we go through the list and decide what's important and what's not, and maybe after we get some better numbers. But it would be easy enough to create starting in 2029, we can afford to start, paying this much out to do the stone pier, or this X amount to do a public safety building, if that's what we want to do. Or whatever the other projects are. I think you're right about, we should use up to 2029. We should be basically using the reserve accounts to build up funds to cover what we know are coming expenses. Because there's no point in bonding ahead of time if we could
Right.
even do it.
And hopefully interest rates will drop by 29, so.
Maybe. Yeah, the other thing that I hear about the Stone Pier, and I don't want to go down a big discussion about the Stone Pier, but one thing is that, of course, that once that turns into that kind of number, there are people who get the whole sunset issue is going to come back again, and that could delay that a lot, because I think if people are, what I've heard is people saying, well, if we're going to put that kind of money into the Stone Pier, maybe we have to revisit other things. So, and I don't want to, as I say, I'm not trying to hijack the conversation, but that's just something that I've heard.
Well,
So that's one. So that's currently an excess land asset, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Valuable excess land asset.
Could I make a suggestion that the implication of what Jay said and what I said is that everything that Chip has been running out in terms of repair, replacement of existing assets, we're essential, other than the public safety building, everything else we're basically assuming gets paid out of reserve accounts. Can we run that out for 10 years and see what it takes to pay for all those other things on reserve accounts?
Yeah, but the issue is how accurate are those other things, right?
Well, I know, but the flip
I
side
haven't
of
looked.
it,
I haven't studied all the work Chip's done and the new
Right.
input for a couple weeks. So I think it's important to do that. Yeah.
well, it seemed to me we could beat, not to denigrate the detail Chip's produced, but presenting it to people's hard. We could probably somehow collapse that into about 10 to 15 lines, which include things like other small fire equipment or something like that.
Oh, sure.
If we could do that and then look at the reserve accounts tied to those 10 or 15 lines, would at least be in a position, because for instance, the road paving, what I think I've heard, tell me if I'm wrong, but there's essentially two lines for road paving. There's unexpected contingency that Mark Dyer is saying, put in 80,000 every year in current money. And then there's that every 3 years, do a third of the repaving, which Chip calculated it was a 267 each time. So that could be reduced to like two lines.
Oh, yeah.
Then you can have like big fire equipment and small fire equipment. And the stuff Jay's dug up, I mean, there were like, there's a bunch of trucks. I mean, it's sort of like that. And see if the reserve accounts cover all that.
Well, that's what this does, and the only way I could figure it out is and anybody's welcome to latch onto it, but is because of all of these different items. I mean,
Right.
how do you do that now for presentation? And my general take on the meeting was that I thought they were very cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of big stuff
Oh,
coming up.
yeah, they knew that. Yes.
They need to get a hold of it, and hopefully, I have, of course, I sent them a link to look at all this. I haven't heard back from anybody, but this spreadsheet, it's scary, but it's reality. So you can
But take, for instance, Chip, where you are right now.
yeah,
If we said, okay, there's a single reserve account, 9055, that handles public works equipment.
that's right.
And we have, from Jay's discussion with Jeff, certain equipment they need in certain years that is known. And the rest of this stuff is almost like a statistical pool. You know, some of this stuff might break and we need to buy replacements. I mean, so we might be able to consolidate that down to something. It's fewer lines, you know.
Well, I wish I could. I can't put my name on it if we erase or we consolidate a lot of these lines, because these items are all over the place. This list, the public works list, is far from done. We've made a good dent on it, and I mean, just going over that, for instance, I've made them darker blue, the ones that were identified as dead. But some of what Jay had here doesn't line up with what the town
Right.
is saying. And you have these long periods of times, and that's what makes these numbers on the end. So you could collapse. I can make that disappear. That's the sum number here that this is saying that we need to put in. And that's why what you do is okay, let's take, they're going to put in $50,000. What if we put in $100,000?
Right, but I'm going the other way around to some extent. If Jay has
Yeah.
a set of specific equipment that needs to be bought in the next couple of years.
Right.
Do we
But-
plug that in and see what it does to the accumulated reserve account? I mean, that could be the other way around, you know?
Absolutely. Well, that's what this is. So as we make these numbers better, these numbers are all from when they were bought. They've done no updates. So they were all from when they were bought. And that's saying that if you want to, some of these items are negative numbers you've got according to what you have.
Right.
So I don't know how to do it and understand each one of these. We certainly can get rid of them. As Jay goes through this, we have some things that are, a dump body, and that's not a lot of money, but we have some things where there was a disparity on one of these, a Holland tractor, the amount that it was and where the number came from. So these are the biggest. This public works equipment and the building are the biggest.
Right.
This, of course, can all be collapsed. That's and
But my concern here, Chip, is this. If where we're ultimately getting to is saying you could borrow this much money in this year because there's going to be enough cash there, we have to be convinced that the reserve accounts in some reasonable manner are covering all the other stuff.
exactly.
Right.
So we need to get comfortable about that before we can make the next recommendation or suggestion.
Absolutely. This needs to, they're telling us they need an oil burner or the waste oil furnace or the wall and the such that. We have no numbers for those. So those two, if we were to concentrate on that, assuming that maybe the fire department is in a world of its own, and I've labeled some of these as maybe handled by operating expenses and then bonding, if it, depending on where we wind up with that. But those two, the building facilities and are without question the biggest. It's just all the stuff they own, and it needs to really be run down. An air compressor system was bought in 2008.
If they bought the big piece of fire equipment that they claim they need immediately, how big does the deposit have to be? Does anyone know?
I don't know. No.
I mean, right away, that would deplete the reserve account a chunk. Let's suppose it's a 30% down payment or something. I mean, that's 150 or 200,000 right there.
Yeah. There's a
Well,
lot.
the fire department reserve at the end of the year, I don't know whether they spent anything, was 191,000.
Right.
I haven't seen any spending updates, but they also need air tanks. It's this year or next year,
Right, exactly.
and that might be $100,000, whether they get a grant or not. So
That's this. Turnout gear and there's a lot. I think nobody likes to look under the hood at this stuff, but man, there's a
Well, I
lot.
agree.
And I agree that we never would put this in front of anybody. I mean, in a presentation or anything. But I think that a lot of this has been You can't say it's just that it's the information that they have and the time that people have to do these things. But there's a lot of these assets. If you're asking are you putting enough in the reserve, and you've got assets that were priced in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Well, that's no good. Yeah.
That's so what I mean, forget about it.
But for instance, under the building facilities that you are showing right here,
Right.
can
These
we
are the-
make a roster that says this must be bought in 26, this must be bought in 27, this must be bought in 28? Or do
Yep.
we only say this stuff is aging?
We don't we're what John did, and he can jump in, was he took the depreciation level that came from the auditors, and that's where we come up. So we know it was built in 2008, it cost 225, and then the years to replace. Now these are maintenance. So we're not even talking about replacing those or the town garage, these are buildings. So we're talking about maintaining them. But if you took a building furnace, it's 19.
There's a 75,000 number over there. It sounds like,
I just threw that in. I had no idea. I'm like, what is a roof cost? I don't know. What is it?
okay, so this isn't numbers we got from someone else. This is.
No, I made them up. No, yeah, this is all the information we have, and I just threw in a number. So somebody said the building was 2008, and it's 25 years for roof. I don't know, I guess. The roof is 100,000. So I just put those numbers in, but you can see how those,
Right.
they're huge.
Well, I guess all I'm saying is it would seem to be useful if we're going to go to Jay's model, and I agree with it, to say in 26 we need to buy this, and in 27 we need to buy this, and in 28 we need to buy this. So where do we stand in 29 if we do all that stuff?
Right. No, I agree. Once we find out, when somebody says, when are we going to need it, you have to know these numbers.
You need to know new numbers. I mean,
New numbers and good numbers. The better the numbers are, the better they are, and at that point, then you can go and make more decisions. But when somebody's telling, somebody tells one of us, just say without, there's a town official has said we need a new roof, we need a new furnace, we need a new septic. We can't just say, that's why I captured it and put it in there. Said, I don't know.
No, I'm agreeing with you, Chip.
I know you are.
They're asking us to put the rubber to the road now, and we need to get the rubber.
And I think back to our early discussion, you almost have to just say, put as much as you can. And build up.
Well, in that case, we aren't bonding anything because we're spending
No,
it
I
on
mean-
the reserve account. So it might be useful. This is just my suggestion. If we could pick out the items that we think they're really going to do in the next 3 or 4 years and ask for some real numbers on those.
Yeah.
We don't have them.
Well, I think they're working, what they've got several contracts with GEI to create 30% designs.
But
So-
not on the public safety building, right?
No.
But the public safety building, though, and I've never seen any documents, but I believe the estimate of $5 to $7 million. Now,
No, I'm
Bob's
talking
got
about the current
got
building where they
2 to
say
8,
they
but
need a
I
roof.
believe an architect came back with the estimate for the public safety building. So I
Right.
believe there's an architectural estimate for that.
I think you're right, but we're talking about the old one, Jim, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the old one, the line you
one-
got there,
the one that we're
61,
looking at
62,
here.
63, yes.
Oh, okay.
Because presumably that's happening regardless of building a new building, because it'll be 6 years till there's a new building up, probably. I mean,
Yeah, so I'm on my phone, so I'm not seeing the
Okay,
detail that you
well,
guys
we
are
got
talking about.
we got a number here that says public safety building roof. And
Yeah,
Chip,
yeah.
Chip has invented 100,000 for that, which might be right or might not. I mean,
Yeah. So I talked to Denise Hamilton yesterday, who's the fire department paid clerk. She works 10 or 20, 8 or 12 hours a week and gets paid to maintain records and do certain things for the fire department. She sat down with Jay and Ralph and I when we did the fire department stuff, and they mentioned the roof. So yesterday, I documented that whole conversation, put the numbers on it, sent it back to Denise and Ralph and said, take a look at this, make sure we got it right. So Ralph wanted to get some different numbers, better numbers, make some tweaks, etc. Denise said that was all done except for one item. I said to her, did Ralph get Doug Ross to come up with a roof estimate? She said, I think he did. So she said, the problem I'm having is, when I don't know what, I think I sent her an Excel spreadsheet, but maybe it was just a letter or a Word document. She said, I'm having trouble getting things lined up. I said, well, do you have notes written on what I gave you that's readable? If so, take a picture of it. So I'll get her this afternoon or tomorrow and say, hey, send me the picture you had, and that might have the roof in it, for example. But I agree, we got to get better numbers.
Isn't that a flat roof? Is that a flat roof? Right?
No, it's a pitched roof.
It's a pitched roof. Okay.
But I guess what I'm saying is we probably know enough, other than surprises, to pull out a whole series of things that people are told us have to occur in the next 3 years. And we could at least try to pin those down to begin to get the next few years pinned down, see if there's enough reserves to cover them all.
This is that, and you're right, Jim, that I mean, the methodology I used for this was to divide this amount of reserve account, if they fund it the way they're expecting to, equally. And that's the only thing you can do. But of course, because you have to come up with a number and say, okay, we're putting in, well, we've already got too much in here for this, for that. But somebody could go, this is an estimate of the replacement year. That's the best information we have, and somebody could pick through that and work it backwards. From 2027, 22. So
for instance, the number you've got in for the septic tank,
right.
I'm just looking at that line. We've been told it needs to be put in 35, or that's just a number that came from an amortization schedule.
Yeah, 50. There was no amortization schedule, and that was based on when they had John and Jay talked to the fire department. I think that came on one of the notes that came back, meeting notes. 50 years. Did I make that up, or was that on there? But a septic system is, can last for a number of years. But,
well, Ralph simply expressed a concern about the septic system. He said, we don't know how old it is, he was throwing out stuff that could be a problem.
right.
I think the same thing about the septic system at my house. Knock on
All
wood.
of us do.
Wish I had.
If you own a
mentioned that.
septic system, it could.
I don't know
screw
whether
up.
it's good for a year or 10 years.
Right. Well, I guess all I'm saying is it'd be useful to make a roster of things we know have to be replaced in the next few years, so we at least can talk to that. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we have what I did over in this column here was create a new column, and I put a who in it, and I went down through the things that were budgeted, that they were going to fund, and I put a color next to it, and I think that people want to go in and put their name, say for instance on this and this. Septic, furnace, and roof, and try and get some kind of estimates. Those are big tickets, and they look like they're might be coming up, fairly soon. So there's a way to do this and choose which ones you want to work on, because this is 30, 40 hours of work. There's a
I
lot.
know.
lot of
Yeah,
work.
and the takeaway from the meeting was, and I think Carol drove this point, that, this is work that the town has to do ultimately,
Right.
so,
Yeah, that's true. And I think I also took away from them that somebody at the point just talked about they're understanding that we haven't had much time with all this. And I think hopefully they have looked at this, whether you like the spreadsheet or not, it gives you a sense of how much you have to pay
Oh,
attention.
yeah.
And they go, wow, there's a lot of stuff. And so I think that they'll understand that. And I think it may be a matter of, are we going to get the numbers right? No, we're just going to see some percentage is going to go towards these things. And if I'm looking at this as a gut shot, the things that are most underfunded are public works and the not the paving so much, but in the buildings. They're just, and maybe I'm overestimating, whatever, but
Probably not.
it-
I mean,
it's,
I think what I'm concerned about, the biggest number I'm concerned about is if they buy a $500,000 or $600,000 piece of fire equipment, and there isn't enough reserves here to handle that. In the next
No.
3 years, they got to chunk big number aside into that reserve to pay for it when it arrives. I mean, it's
yeah, it is that one, that's, yeah,
and I'm curious, Jay, when you talked to Jeff, they were discussing what vehicles they needed to replace and equipment they needed to replace.
Okay, what they want to get another F-350 plow truck.
So that's $100,000 probably right there.
That's, 100's probably about the right number. It's to replace the F-250 that's, I don't know if it's totally gone or given away or junked or what. But that's what they'd like. The other equipment that they mentioned acquiring on their wish list was, did I just lose everybody?
No,
No.
I'm here.
I can hear you.
That's weird. Okay.
John's just being stoic.
He's
Is
frozen.
they wanted to get a roller so that when they do the roads, the gravel roads, that it packs them down and makes them last longer and makes a
Right.
better job. And there we go. The other thing was and this is the other, there are a bunch of questions revolved around what was going to be on their duty roster. If they're going to handle floats and ramps and so forth, in terms of repair, storage, and so forth, they need to spend a lot of money on fixing up the existing equipment, which is all not in very good shape. The other option is there apparently is a guy in Freeport who does that kind of work. Apparently, I don't know what his bid was to do the work, but that's the alternative. That apparently is a decision made by Coastal Waters. And then
Is that considered a capital activity or just ongoing maintenance?
it's really ongoing maintenance, but I think it's going to be fairly expensive maintenance. And then the other thing was if the school is not going to be mowing the lawn at the field, and the town's going to be doing, if the town has to do it, they need a mower. Otherwise, they're going to have to figure out if they can get Gennaro back to do it again this year. So I'm not quite sure why they thought that they might end up with it on their schedule, but they don't have the equipment to do it. And so
you just named 3 pieces of equipment they need, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, or they think they need. They've
Right,
been doing the plowing this year without the extra plow truck.
right.
And we've
But-
had more snow this year than we had in the last 3 or 4.
Do they have a
Right.
backup plow truck?
Uh, they've got 3 that are working,
Oh, okay.
and that truck number 4 is the oldest one and is the most suspect one. I'm trying to find out where I got my notes on that.
Line
but it works.
149, I think, or 148, 149. That's a dump truck. That's a truck, number 4, yes.
So,
It's a 1981 truck?
yeah, it still works. The F-250 that crashed, it was a 2000 and something, 12, 10, 12. But anyway, there was part of that list that I got that I hope everybody's seen. I don't have it in front of me because I gave my copy to Jeff
I
the
just,
other night.
oh,
But there was a whole the list was broken up. The last part of the list was stuff that is either totally not working or gone. And we should probably just eliminate all that stuff from our schedule. And I see that some of it's still there.
well, it's, if you look at, so this morning, Jay, I took your, your stuff is on here. The minor equipment is not, but I just posted it on Basecamp.
Okay.
So those items have been made, I took numbers out of those items here, like the
Gotcha.
2003. So they should be, you should find, and I wanted you to take a look at this list to make sure it, and that, this is certainly one of the most complicated lists. Well, it's the most complicated list.
Well, there are 4 or 5 complicated lists. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
depends on your, definition of complication, I guess, but
there's some complicated ones, yes.
Yeah, I noticed. As you ran by, I noticed that the bulldozer is still on the list.
Bulldozer might be listed, but I should have taken the, I don't know. So I can't say that I have, oh, I see.
Anyway, I'll go through this.
You need to go through it and
Yeah.
yeah. It's when I take something off the list, I didn't necessarily take it off the list, but to
Took the impact away.
took the impact away, and so the list needs a lot more work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anything,
So-
if you want to, we can have an offline discussion, Jay, when you're comfortable, and we can go online with this and look at it. And you could tell me new numbers to plug in, and we can do all that.
Okay.
As you work through this.
So we collectively have a concern that there's so much work to do on the existing asset list that we're not going to have a good comfort level as to what reserve spending will be required over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Right.
Because even if the existing assets, if everything that was on the list was pretty well up to snuff, we don't have things on there like roof replacements or, there's other things, maintaining existing equipment. So I don't know how comfortable we're going to get with that. We obviously are going to continue to work on that. Backing up to, we're still on item 2 on the agenda, I think, which is identify what did we hear in the budget meeting and what are our next steps to that. And Jay, I think it was Jay said, it might have been Jim and Jay, that they're looking for the finance committee to be the bad guys that say we really need to increase taxes or whatever, something to that effect. I'd put it in a more, let's put it in a more collegial frame of reference. What thinking about, it's going to be a joint presentation. The Board of Selectmen are going to present their budget. The school's going to present their budget, and the Finance Committee, I think they're looking for an independent voice to say, here's the general capital situation of the town. We got a lot of existing stuff that will need to be replaced and maintained over time. And, we're working on that. And, we got to put some numbers around that if we can. And then we got these big projects. And then an education on, the benefit of doing it through reserves, through bonding. But, directionally, I think our message is only going to be that, we ought to be trying to save through reserves for everything that costs less than $1 million, if that's what we agree on. And, to what's our wherewithal to bond these priority projects. And here are the priorities, and here are the cost estimates that are really, really rough, that came from the Board of Selectmen and GEI. I don't know.
I agree with what you're saying, John, but I think there's one more thing I heard last night or Wednesday night.
Yep.
Which is that there is a scenario when taxes don't increase, and there's a scenario with some increase in taxes. They're looking for some kind of, what's the difference?
Okay. I didn't hear that, but that I have those notes. That's what you said originally.
Well, there was a thing about 2% a year
Yep.
or something I heard, and I was like, huh.
Oh, really?
Okay. Oh, yeah, I was from Bob Ernest, I think.
It was either
yeah,
Bob or Carol.
Bob said something about, holding taxes to some number, and I guess
And then he said,
I
or
ignored
maybe
that.
we
I
have to
ignored that
say,
because I thought it was way off the mark.
now then he was saying, or maybe we have to, see, I think they view holding the taxes being, taxes go up by inflation. Because you'd never hold taxes with an inflated operating budget, so there's
Right.
like scenario 1 with inflation and scenario 2 with a little more than inflation, I think.
Yes,
Okay.
You
Okay.
agree with me, Jay?
I do. I
You
do.
heard the
Okay.
same thing, yep.
Yeah, they're and equally as to what's going to increase. I look at it, they've got an operating budget, which is what they need to spend every year just to go. And then they need to add to that some amount of money for the reserve funds. And the question is up to now, what they've done is when they were spending more money than they really had, they'd go to the undesignated reserve fund. And the trouble is they've gone to the well too many times. And it's not that their budgeting has improved. They've just been to the well too often. Not that they would put it that way. And so that's where that's how they've balanced the budget, if you will, or in theory, minimized the tax increases. But last year, as you point out to me often, John, they had an 8% increase.
Right. Right.
So
And I'm not even sure they recognize that yet.
they don't
So-
seem to.
I have a question about that, which is my ignorance of taxes on Shabig. Does the assessment on an individual property increase from year to year based on inflation? Or does
No.
it sit flat until there's a reassessment?
So look, go ahead, Jay.
It sits flat unless you've gotten a building permit to do some work.
Okay, so in most communities I've worked in that have that style of taxing, they assume they're going to increase the rate every year by the level of inflation just to stay even.
Mhm.
And they do that. They inch it up, and then there's a lawsuit, and then there's a big reassessment. and everything goes back to square one and they inch up again. I mean, that's their model. I'm assuming you're in a similar scenario.
So to answer, Chip, can you find I posted on Basecamp, so it should be under one of the daily activities not too long ago, comments from the tax assessor where he's thought we could plan on a certain amount of growth. But in there, he had a little chart that showed the change over the last 6 years of the assessed value of our real estate.
In that, did he say something about Jackie used to just increase everybody's valuation every year?
Yeah, and that's what I want to show you.
Okay.
So it's on
Which
Thursday, March 6th. There it is.
Which,
so you
Jim,
guys
makes
got
my
that.
previous answer incorrect.
Right. So you look at 2016 through 2024, the tax base. And so there's a 25% increase one year, a 13% another, and a 30% another. And so in a conversation where Herb was there and the selectmen were there, Carol and Bob, I said, 1 year recently, they just flat out increased everybody's assessment a certain percentage to get it what they thought was close to 100% assessment. And they said, oh, no, they don't just use a flat percentage. It was a more sophisticated tool than that. Well, I don't know. I looked at 5 or 6 people I knew in the tax records and they all went up the same percentage.
Well, CPI, I just looked up CPI between 2019 and 2024, and it's up roughly 25% in the consumer price index.
Yeah.
Cumulatively.
Yeah.
So your municipal valuation is up 90% or 85% during that same period. So presumably the tax rate should be decreasing.
Well, yeah, and so one member of the when I said the taxes went up 8%, they said, well, that seems strange because the millage only went from 9 to 10.
Well, that's
an 11% increase.
But if you look at it between 23 and 24, they did not increase the evaluation. Therefore, they had to increase the tax rate to make up for the fact that they didn't increase the valuation.
That's right.
The real
That's
difference was prior years when they boosted it between 19 and 23, they went up 30%, close to it.
Yeah.
These numbers don't reflect spending from the undesignated fund, right?
No, this is just the evaluation. The commitment, it kind of does. And so the commitment is the amount of money he needed to raise from real estate taxes. And you see in the top right, it says the 8.19%. That was the tax increase last year.
But that commitment doesn't include that $200,000 that they took out of
That's right. That commitment was less because they took the $250 out of the reserves. So
Okay.
if you add the revenue in the budget to the commitment, you would come close to the planned expenses.
So somebody made the point, it's a tax is a tax is a tax, if you're spending.
I'm looking at it. It looks to me if I took 2019, the commitment was about 3 million and the tax base was 181 million.
Right.
mm-hmm.
So the tax rate was, hold on. Uh, 1.66% of the valuation was the commitment. So 1.66%. So whatever the effective tax rate was, It was 1.66%.
Yeah, so that's 16 mils. That's $16 per $1,000
Right.
of evaluation.
So-
And
This
now the
year,
now the
this
millage is
year-
11 or something.
this year it's 1.07. So the rate has gone way down.
Right. The millage went from 16, 17 down to 10.
Right.
But that's
So
just,
there are adjustments being made. I mean, it's,
Well, I think, back to the meeting, Jeff had a simple explanation of what he told people. And I think I heard somebody say during the meeting, one of the select board, to look at previous tax years and, did we go up as much as other communities? Last year, the ad hoc group has some kind of stuff in their slide deck about that. But we're talking about basically the only thing, I mean, you can go up millage and valuation, blah, blah, but basically the far right percent increase is what the homeowners saw.
Right.
right.
So there were, and I think it's a simple explanation. Are we the bad guys? I don't know. What do you want to do with a 20-year-old truck? You tell me. But if you look, it strikes me based on Jim's, if that went up, let's use 3% for increase every year. I mean, it was deficient in a lot of those years. That would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would have been a total 20. If you went up 3% a year for 8 years, it's compounded. But anyway, it's more. So I think that's a powerful number to present to people when maybe I'm glad I'm not going to be in town that day at the meeting. You guys can handle it, but I think but I think that's an important thing for people to know. Maybe you were light for 5 years, and
well, if the thing I quickly looked up on my phone was right, and don't hold me to it because I may have punched in the wrong information. But it says between 19 and 24, CPI went up 27.5%. And I know there was a big year in there, like a 10 or 12% year in there. The commitment has only gone up 20%. So they're 7% behind inflation in the commitment. And that's probably being masked by the rollover of the undesignated reserve account.
Right. That's masked some of it. Now, how do we get, for instance, a Cumberland number of what Cumberland went up? That's available?
Yeah, I think that's readily available, but you mentioned
Not our
earlier.
job.
What?
No, but
I don't know that that's our job.
Well, but if you don't want John and Jay to get tarred and feathered, they need some cover.
Well, maybe, but the flip side of that is the fact that we even admit we should be having that conversation puts them exposed.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you should be talking about capital needs and how you can bond for
yeah,
it.
no, and I think that's right, and that's why it's a collegial presentation. What do we see as the picture that we've been
Exactly.
putting this amount away in capital reserves. We're not totally confident that's been enough, and now we've got these lengthy list of future projects. So we need to.
Well, I think you got 3 messages, which you said at different times, but should be the core of it, which is we did bond for a bunch of stuff, and those bonds are coming paid off. So there's capacity there.
Yep.
There are big expense items that we'll never be able to handle through reserve accounts. So it's a good thing we got capacity because we have some things we have to bond for. And number 3, everything else we probably should keep handling through the reserve accounts. And that's a simple message.
Yep. And clear.
Yep. Okay.
And it doesn't get you into proposing tax increases right off the bat, except hypothetically.
Right. And then I think they would want us to show the big projects, maybe not, but related to, and what the cost range is, and speak about bonding costs as Jay did the other night. Um,
I agree, yeah. Everybody should know everything. The more they know, the better.
so,
I hope we'll have better numbers than these by the time you have to present.
right. So I'll start to put together, and we can all start to put together. We ought to do it on through Basecamp. What do we see as a slide? And if we're talking 15-minute presentation, that's probably 15, no more than 20 slides, right? Maybe
Yeah.
less.
Yeah, maximum, but I think there's another thing we need to do ahead of that, which is to really insist we get some better information about needed expenses before you ever walk through the door to make that talk. All the things we've talked about that we need the town to say, yes, a new roof is going to cost X, or at least a ballpark on that. Or we don't need the roof. That was just someone's wild ass idea.
Yeah.
And GEI will produce numbers when they've been paid most of their money. We need to accelerate that production. I work with engineers a lot. I understand it's near
Well,
the end of the contract that you see budgets.
I think they entered into 3 contracts with GEI, one for the barge ramp at Bennett's Cove, one for South Shore Drive, and one for the Stone Pier. So I would assume that those guys would be responsive. We've kind of said, you're going to be our lead dog on all this stuff. And
right,
they know
but you don't want them saying we'll have those numbers in August.
Well, yeah, that's
we
what the process would be. Sure.
The trouble with all this, I mean, the reality is of the resources to do this, the challenge, and I'm not sure. Who do we? That's why I asked the other day. As far as communication, we were supposed to communicate with Vika and Bob primarily. I mean, should we invite them to be on Basecamp so they're being asked questions directly and they can respond directly, or instead of sending an email and getting them back, or I don't know.
I don't know. I think we ought to start by just sending Bob and Vika an email with with the 4 of us copied, and Carol White can be copied. She's a member of this committee, an ex officio member of this committee, and say, here are the questions. For example, what capital equipment was purchased since 2023? Herb told us that he thought the town accountant could spit that out quite efficiently.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have it.
Let me tell you when you asked that question. It was 3 weeks ago, easy.
Yeah.
So this is the reality, I think, of we're kind of pushing a string on this, and we don't really have any authority.
Yeah.
But all we can.
I think it would be useful, though, among ourselves, and I'll maybe, based on this conversation, start this off by making a list of things we think need to be purchased before 2030, based on what people have told us, even if we don't know how much they cost. I'll look at the various stuff in Basecamp and generate an initial list and send it to everybody to
Well,
add and subtract from.
To some degree, Chip's got that on the asset list, or it will get updated on the asset list. And
some of it is there, and some of it is just a hypothesis of when something was going to wear out.
Yeah, that's fine, and you can use that to get your ideas, Jim. So, what needs to be purchased by 2030? You said.
Let's say 2030, because Jay, I think, is correct. We're probably talking about bonding in 29.
Okay. All right. I'm making a to-do right now, and I'm putting your name on it.
So if I wanted to sort this spreadsheet in Excel, where do I access this in Basecamp? What's this thing called, this particular spreadsheet?
This this spreadsheet, let me just finish. Okay, I can finish that. On Basecamp, Jim, there's a master under the assets, real property replaceable. It says master asset worksheet, and that's where the link is.
Okay, it's called Master Asset Worksheet. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the first one there.
All
And
right.
you can't sort this giant spreadsheet, spreadsheet, but just because of the way it all works. But you can
Can
certainly.
I copy this page of the spreadsheet into an Excel file and manipulate it myself?
Yeah, I sent you one. Yeah, I can download right now.
Well, if you could do that and just send it to me and I'll play with it.
So here is a copy of the current sheet for your pleasure.
Are you emailing it to me?
I'm putting it on Basecamp right now. Yeah,
What's that one called?
it's the same thing. What I'm doing from the up in here, you just go to it and you say create a copy.
I understand, but what's it named?
Right here, TOCF at 250127, and of the current sheet. Use as you want. It won't affect the master. So I'll download that. Everybody can have their copy, and you can. I mean, that makes more sense than going online. If you want to change something online, we can do that. But
Okay, I think we're all on the same page with what the budget presentation might look like. Generally, we're probably going to argue that we shouldn't say that, or we shouldn't say this, or we can't say that at the end of the day. But I think to make sure we're coordinated with the select board, if the presentation's on the 26th, we ought to be having a draft presentation roughed out by about 10 days in advance of that. And one, so they can provide us feedback. But two, because I think Chip's going on vacation on 4/19, and I certainly would like Chip to be involved in pretty much up till the end as to what we're putting together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
that's fine. What's the date? What's the date you just threw out there, John?
The presentation's 4/26, so have a draft of the community presentations April 26th. So have 10 days in advance of that, have a draft done. So that's about a month from now, right?
Okay, so but you say 4/26.
I said 4/16. I didn't even look at what day of the week that is.
Okay, 4/16 due. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm kind of on item 4, discuss Basecamp task list updates since last meeting. Well, Jay put some stuff in there, right? We got a third draft of the budget. Jay had the public works stuff. Jay's got some town-owned land updates. We had some feedback from the assessor, and we just looked at a little bit of that. And then did we get a list of grants that Carol was maintaining? Did we ever get that?
I think that's in Basecamp. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, I think those are the big things that happened, plus all the work you've been doing, Chip, on the asset list, and then pulling the presentation together.
Yeah, I agree. I just downloaded that. Everyone can download the spreadsheet and just look at it and see what you think is important. And yeah, and I have questions for Bika that, go to some of the other things, but they're not critical. But yeah, that's not a lot of time. That's a month. So yeah.
Right. So,
Speaking of grants for a second, John,
yep.
I think that those earmarked grants have gone the way.
Yeah, I don't know whether they voted on the budget yet or not, but I know they're not in the budget, and everything I've read said they're gone.
Yeah.
They're going to be gone because Schumer's convincing Democrats to support the budget in the Senate.
Right.
Um, so if you think from the perspective of, okay, we've got this committee, we're here to help the town, help the selectmen, help the capital planning process. What can we do between now and when they're going to finalize the budget? I think we can put this presentation together that educates the community about capital spending and bonding and the big projects. But are there possibly there? And when I look at the calendar on the town website, they've got a second budget meeting scheduled with the school on April 2nd. And then on May 17th, there's a full budget presentation by the school and the Board of Selectmen. We've got the 4/26 Saturday workshop isn't on the calendar yet, but in our meeting on Wednesday, they talked about having a capital discussion, the fourth draft of the budget, in which they would discuss capital. And I think they also need to come back and deal with the request from the nonprofits, but I don't see that scheduled. So I'm going to reach out to Bob and ask him what that schedule is, because we need to be plugged into that. And then a related question is, are there things we know about the reserve accounts that we want to recommend when they talk about the reserve accounts, such as fire trucks, for example, that they ought to be putting away X, which is more than they have or whatever, and I haven't even looked at it, so that we can buy a fire truck, pay for a fire truck by 2027 or 2028.
Well, do we have a number we believe for the fire truck?
Yeah,
Yeah.
500.
Yeah,
We believe the 500?
yeah, and Ralph's, I think, actually might have, when we get this new stuff, maybe we'll get a different number, but they're engaged to the degree that Ralph, I think, has started to have conversations about, can you customize this truck so it'll fit in the current fire department? So,
Good, because
Yeah.
the article I read about that and what's happened with fire production is that every fire truck is a one-off now. There are no standard model fire trucks anymore.
yeah, Ralph spoke a little bit differently when Jay and I talked to him, but I don't know.
The other thing that we haven't talked about at all relative to Ralph was the air tanks,
Right.
because he was looking for to spend 100 grand, 80 to 100,000.
Yep.
And I don't think that's in his operating budget.
No.
Well, I think if I read Chip's spreadsheet correctly, the reserve account was 190,000
Right.
and there was 57,000 added this year. Now, whether that's in the 190 or it's in addition to the 190, I don't know.
No, it's the 50 in the budget 2026 is 50,000. So it's that 57 is, I don't know why they put that in there, but
Well, that 57 was what was going in this fiscal year 2025.
so we,
And is that in addition to the 190 or is that part of the
No,
190?
that got it to 190.
That got it to 190.
You got it to 190. Okay.
Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna
So
make,
basically, they need 600,000 in the next 3 years, and they got 190.
Yep.
There's the first recommendation. You got to start socking away 150,000 a year for fire equipment.
Yeah, or say that the policy is not that you're going to bond things that are 500,000 or more and have a or have a life of 25 years or more.
Does,
Right.
well, are you allowed to depreciate the fire truck over 25 years by the state of Maine?
Do not know. But you see, so the discussion is: are there specific recommendations we can make? I'll
But there's
take up.
some reserve accounts that are overfunded right now.
Yep.
Okay, so we ought to point that out and say, take that money and put it someplace else, because that only happens through the town
Yeah,
meeting
warrant.
process.
This
Yeah.
solar array is one. Jay had mentioned that a long time ago. That's on the spreadsheet as a negative number.
Right. So now the solar array, it would be nice if we could resolve that thing completely and say, we don't want to buy it, take the money out. Now, Herb said, before we'd ever buy it, we ought to have a engineering assessment or an assessment as to its condition and useful life or something like that. We haven't even seen the write-up from last year that said, don't buy it, there's no rush. I think Jay heard that Revision Energy spent a lot of money on it recently. I just got an email from Ellie Hughes, who is a fellow working for the Greater Portland Climate Action Group. And she said, Bob Ernest told me that the decision on the solar array now rests with the Finance Committee. Is there anything I can do to help? And could I meet with you Monday or Tuesday next week? So I think I might try to put that project in her lap, or at least find out what she knows about it. And I'll also try to reach out to Chris Loader this weekend and say, hey, what do you know? Should we be doing it? But it's also a place where we didn't get any information. We never got the contract from Vika, and I have no idea what we're paying for, what our monthly bills look like with the solar array.
Yeah, it's yeah.
But that would be something we potentially could get done in the next couple of weeks.
Well, just briefly on the solar array question, because every time I see Steve Inchman, he said, well, what are you guys going to do? Sort of. And, basically right now, I understand, I haven't seen the numbers either, that we're saving money on electric. We have a little lower rate because of the solar array. Owning it, it seems to me that we run the risk of having to put a lot more money into it, just like Revision did, because we don't know what we're doing. And two, how much is it really worth to us to tie up money if if the difference between owning it and not owning it is marginal?
Right.
And isn't the price dropping every year?
Every year. And then at the end of the whole thing, I think Revision owns it. Because
they own it or the town owns it?
I'm not sure. I got to go back and take another look.
If the purchase price drops every year, the town should buy it when it gets as low as possible.
Yeah, well, that's the last year. It's $6,000.
Yeah.
And didn't I give you a copy of that contract, John?
You did, and I said I was going to scan it in, but you also told me it was 10 pages, and it was like 20 double-sided pages. So I refused to scan that in.
Okay, sorry about that.
Now I made copies of a couple of pages that showed the buyout schedule, and it also showed the fee schedule that we were paying for electric. And with that, my mind went to well, I'd like to see the bills we're getting so we understand what the hell how many kilowatts we're paying for and what the charge is. So,
Right, right.
If,
But-
John, if you want to give it to me, I can scan it. No, no problem. If we can do that, so we have a copy of it.
I've got
No.
so I've got it from Jay. I'll get it to you.
Okay.
Chip.
Are there any other accounts?
Well, the other thing is that what Jay gave me wasn't necessarily the final document, right, Jay?
True,
It was close to the last draft.
yeah.
So
So what doesn't, do we need to go camp out in Vika's office to get one?
let's put it on Vika's list, right?
Okay, good. The other thing, and I mentioned this, I bumped into Bob Ernst last night while he was walking his dog. And the other thing I mentioned to him was, why don't we take that 50 grand that's in the broadband account and find a good spot for it?
I don't know. I don't understand the broadband. I mean,
Well, I heard some conversation that might be there as a repair fund, but I don't know.
Well, the contract says Axiom's responsible for all that.
Okay.
And they're also supposed to be paying us, which isn't
Yeah.
happening.
I
So-
think Vika said she just got a check. Did I hear her say that?
I'm not sure. I missed that if you did.
Was something. I have a couple questions when there's a break here about the Coastal Access Fund. I'm just looking at numbers that look to be where we're overfunded in the reserve. And the Coastal Access Fund, what is that?
Is that the floats?
No, the floats are up here.
It's okay. It's like making sure down at Chandler's that you can actually get to the beach,
Oh, okay.
that kind of stuff. And at all the access points where the town has easements in place to get to the beach, basically,
Okay.
where there are little ramps and so forth,
So
that-
I have, yeah, okay. Sorry. So I have this as something that would be maintained at a rate of 3%. We probably don't need to do that at all.
probably not.
This is
Okay.
more like a contingency fund.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get rid of that. The other account that has a fair amount appears to is the cemetery perpetual care.
I wouldn't step into that.
That might be a state law mandated
Okay,
number.
okay,
Let's don't go cemetery
Do
right
we
now.
understand quicksand and swamp?
okay.
Yes.
So we'll,
Yeah.
okay, so we will, but again, that's not something that necessarily needs to be, okay, so I'm gonna get rid of that too as something that needs to be maintained. That's like coastal access. There's nothing that needs to be retained or replaced. Okay. Okay, that was that.
So do we have anything else that's transferable to fire trucks?
There wasn't, I mean, they appear to be over, again, based on this maintenance rate of, barge ramps, but that's getting funded this year. So I don't think, I just put a maintenance rate.
Why is there 95,000 being added to barges and
boats and gangways?
floats and gangways this year?
That's
I don't
because
know.
there's one committee that does a great job of maintaining their capital plan.
That's Herb. Yeah.
That's Herb.
And they
But he
get,
tells us he's getting state money to pay for all that, right?
Floats
Yeah.
and gangways, how much are they getting this year?
There's
95.
95,000 on this budget.
Whoa,
These are, yeah.
Now, he presented a written annual report from the Coastal Waters Commission that demonstrated the need for that. Part of it is the work that's happening down at Chandler's,
Okay,
I think you're right.
where
Yeah.
where we have
okay.
the ramp and float that go down to private and lobster boats. That's not state ramp. And then the pilings on that side of Chandler's are our responsibility. So
Right.
there was money in for that was significant.
Yeah.
Okay, so, right. But everything you've got on this is sub items here, Chip, are off an amortization schedule, right? They're not off of
Correct.
any budgeted item we know about.
Those are just what John took off of the accountant's depreciation schedule. So
Right,
we don't know if those are accurate, and they're important numbers because they go out 5, 10 years. If you're off by 5 years, that makes a big difference.
well, I understand, but it goes back to whether it's something we know is gonna be budgeted or whether we're simply building up a reserve account for some future event, so.
Right. Right.
I mean, the Stone Wharf is the ultimate one of those.
Yeah. Somebody asked the question of why we're adding 300,000 and there'll be 900, but I don't know what how much they have to pay for DEI and what.
Well, and what I heard on that was, I think, well, GEI is being paid on the Stone Wharf right now from the grant they got from the state, which I found, what fund that came out of. That was a $75,000 grant. It was the smallest grant that fund gave out this year.
Huh.
But the average grant was like 200,000, and I think that fund is now wiped out. I think that's the place we need to know from GEI what they're hearing about rumblings for new state funding to create more of these resilience funds, that there'll probably be a place to get some money from. The
Yeah.
flip side of that was when I looked at the distribution of grants that came out of that fund, there were 3 or 4 that got 4 million each. But the vast majority of the grants were 200,000. And I doubt if Shebig has the political horsepower to be a $4 million grant place in a fund like that. So the odds are there'll probably be some money, but it's going to be in the 6-digit range, not the 7-digit range. But I'd like to hear GEI tell us what they know about that, because it's got to be right in their wheelhouse.
What was that, a federal grant?
No, it was state money that got, I think it was probably in a bond from, I wrote a brief thing on that. I think it was, I'm going to say it was 2021, maybe. They created this fund. It's got a total of, I believe it had 60 million in it. And they gave out 40 million in one allocation last summer. And Shebig got 75,000 out of that to pay GEI for the 30% work on the Stone Wharf. But that was the smallest grant of the whole batch. There were a lot of grants, but very few were over $1 million. And they were mostly much larger jurisdictions.
I think Bob mentioned relative to the Stone Wharf, why more money was because if you're going out and asking people for money,
Right.
they feel it's important that you have shown your
Match.
yeah.
You got match. You got to show match.
Yeah. It's
But on the other hand, if you ended up bonding the Stone Wharf, you'd free up all that reserve to shift to something else.
back to grants, just as a future item, agenda item. I've been thinking about, overall things, ways to tap in. A lot of it's to resources because, we had, as far as people who want to be on the committee, the finance committee, I wonder, I'd be surprised if within our population, summer and year round, there weren't people who had some kind of talents or knowledge or, understood these things. I know there are grant people that get hired to write grants, but that type of thing. And if we could attract people to donate some time, if they knew it was a finite much, you're not joining the finance committee, you're just helping us to try and understand the grant process or educate us about it. I feel like there's a lot of people.
Well, I do a lot of that, Chip.
You do? Oh,
I
good.
do, and I'll tell you, it's all very specialized when you get into this area.
Yeah,
You're going to have people who know state funding processes
yeah,
and people who know federal funding processes. Most grant writers know how to write grants to small foundations for small amounts of money, which is of use for some of this stuff, but really not for use with what we're tackling. We want the people that know where $1 million is buried, not the ones who know how to get 3,000 out of somebody's pocket.
no,
And that's the reason I'm very concerned about us tapping GEI, because they could not be in business if they weren't on top of what the state's doing in capital funding of infrastructure, because that's their job.
yeah, good.
I think we need to find out what they know. And it may be that other people could be useful at some point here,
Yeah,
but this is specialized stuff and we're into specialized niches here.
well, there was some grant writers that got, I think it was Strawberry Isle, $1 million for broadband back 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, but that was a pot of money that came out during the pandemic.
No, this was before that, Jim. Yeah,
Okay, well, that was the pre-pandemic, but that was federal grant money.
it was before the pandemic. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's probably someone who had the connections to the federal elected officials who tried working on those earmarks.
yeah.
Does anyone know how big those earmarks were? I know they're all dead now.
About 2.5 million.
And was that with the Congresswoman?
That was, Pingree came up with, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000, I think. And Collins had 2 million, I think.
Okay.
Those
well,
are round numbers. There's not.
well, that's the kind of thing that if we could find someone who knows those connections would be useful sometime in the future, but not this year.
And not
Yeah.
for Collins right now.
The total in earmarks, by the way, I gather was 50 billion.
Well, it was 1% of the federal budget,
That's,
which it's limited by under their rules that they now have. However, they're all gone.
Okay, where are we on the agenda?
We've screwed it up, John.
I don't
No,
know.
that's fine. I got a bunch of action items listed here. So maybe I'll run through those and then we can say, are there anything we're missing? So we said we didn't talk about what might be, we talked a little bit about what might be on our presentation on April 26th. So I will start a base camp task of creating slides and identifying slides. And then if we can all contribute that would be good. I'm going to reach out to Bob and Vika and find out the schedule for the rest of the budget season, because we don't know when they're going to talk about capital and capital reserves, but that needs to be on their schedule. And we're going to all do some work on the asset list and see if we can identify places where the reserves need to be beefed up. And maybe there's a place or two where things can be reallocated. we know some money can come out of the solar array. Maybe it could all come out if in the next couple of weeks we could decide we shouldn't do that and have good justification for that. Going through the capital asset list, we talked about seeing if by identifying known purchases by 2030, we could get some comfort level about reserve funding levels and use that as we thought through bonding capacity. I need to get the update from the fire department and confirm the fire truck costs, see if Ralph's still sticking with the 500,000. I think that's all I had on my list.
I'm putting on I have a column that I put on the asset spreadsheet just so people can put their names in and what they're working on. And I can get some more clarification so we can understand better what barge ramps are and then make sure we understand the floats and gangways and make sure that the definition of that.
Is the barge ramp Bennett's Cove?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I wasn't sure about, is it?
So I'm wondering if this is toward the thing that's on our big projects list.
I don't know, but I can't imagine them doing that for $60,000 for
No, well, they said it's $1 million, but this could be,
Oh, yeah,
this may be the engineering bill from GEI.
yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
I'll try and clarify that and I'll talk to them and make sure just so we know, and also firm up the I wrote down town office and the land acquisition just so we understand. I don't understand all that stuff. Matching
I
grant,
think that's another contingency.
So I'm gonna ask Vika for the solar array contract and electrical cost history related to that contract. And I'm also gonna ask her if the accountant can't give us a list of all capital assets purchased since 2023.
Right.
And I'm
And
gonna include Bob Ernest on all those emails.
at some point, John, if I can sort through this spreadsheet, if I come up with a roster of things we think are going to be needed by 2030, share it among all of us. And then maybe you ask Vika at that point when we firm that up, is this the roster of things we really know about that have to be
Yep.
done in the next 5 years? But that would be once we've cleaned this up to
Yep.
get that question. So
okay.
Yeah, and when we started this whole project, and we had a conversation with Herb a little bit about it. I don't know, within the last month. I personally like to have a little history of things. Like, we
Yes.
just looked at from the assessor. We just saw that history of the tax commitment. Well, that's enlightening because it real quickly showed us what the tax increases were throughout time, and they weren't all that significant. But having a history of what capital we've been a town since 2007. What's our capital spending history on all the nuts and bolts and other stuff other than the big projects? If we could see what that was every year for the
Right.
last 15 years, that might give us a little confidence about what it might be in the future.
Problem with that, John, is that these reserve accounts get used as an intermediary location. Money gets put in the reserve account, then it gets taken from the reserve account.
Right.
It's almost, you need to know what was taken from the reserve account. And
Yeah,
why.
well, that's that question. Exactly.
Yeah,
What spending occurred from the reserve accounts? Right.
right. Yeah, that would be useful. I'm struck, and I don't know how Chip managed to do some of this stuff, but I'm looking like at the Ford ambulance. So we know 156,000 was spent in 2021 on the ambulance.
That, that's right. There's questions about that. I don't, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, but there also, at least if this is an accurate set of data, there's some real good reference points buried in here on things like that. We know the new school, we know the ambulance. I mean, there's some big items we have good information on here.
So that would be an example of something we might recommend needs to be in the reserve thing. So that's account reserve rescue vehicles are 9092. It's account
9192.
9192. And they're not putting any reserve aside for that. So I think,
I'm guessing the 2003 Ford ambulance, when it dies, it's gone.
correct. But
The new one's
the
the
next
one
one
we'll
needs
use.
to, but we know the replacement date for we've got two ambulances, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And they want another one. I think we have a replacement date for one of them. I can't see that.
It's in 2021 we bought it for 156, and then the estimate is 12 years, and
Right.
you work all that out, and to get to that at that time, the 156 inflation to 12 years, we don't have any reserves, so there's nothing to offset it. Is 250,000. That's at a 4%.
Yeah. So we need to be putting 20,000 a year away or something,
30.
right?
31.
30?
Yeah.
30. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an example. We know that pretty firmly.
That's a
So,
pretty simple explanation, right?
right,
Demonstration of it. Yeah.
right.
But that's what I'm concerned about here, John, is we have the items we can say, at least we know are going to be spent, or we think are going to be spent in the next 5 years. Then we have at least three other pots. We have things that we know about that are big, that we can project a date. There's other things that are almost a statistical buy. There's a whole bunch of this kind of equipment. It's cost this much. We'll buy some of it every year. And then there's a contingency in some cases, or
Right.
like, for instance, the access to the shore or whatever. So we got different layers of reserves here to some extent to get buried in these accounts.
Right. They've combined things that, yeah, they are. Yeah, I try to identify them, and again,
You've found all the molds in the ground here, Chip.
well, and if
you
you have
figure out which one is which sex.
that's whack-a-mole. What are you going to whack first? Yeah, they've but and we can go back and we can change these and update them. But I guess the that like a simple example of that ambulance, 30 grand a year for if it's 12 years. Now, if you put 15 in there instead of 12,
Well, I see the other one's supposed to last 99 years
99 years, yes.
in
We'll
its
have
current state.
4th of July parade.
Yeah. One of the things about vehicles on this island is that normally when people figure a life on things,
Yeah,
they use mileage.
yeah,
That's got nothing to do with any vehicle on this island.
Right.
yeah. No,
Wow.
and likely that could be changed to 12. I don't know. I assume John got that from the from the accountants. So they just say, well, most ambulances are 12. But yeah, that
This is a
probably-
good question to ask, though.
I think we might have gotten that from Ralph. Jay, do you
Oh,
think?
really?
I don't know.
Oh,
So let's ask the question, the old ambulance, how is it used? If
It's-
it died, would they have to replace it? And if so, with what?
It's functional, sort of, mostly functional. It drives. It sits in that fabric building next to the town building. And if they need it, if they've got a little time, they can get it cranked up and going.
But do they ever need it? Or is this a backup in case the other ambulance for some reason doesn't work?
Yeah, I think it's a backup.
It's a
Or,
backup.
if they had some catastrophe, they'd probably put it into service.
Right.
Multi-person catastrophe.
So for instance, like the golf course, if this one died, would we hunt for a used ambulance from some other more populated location to create a backup? Is there a backup ambulance slot here?
I think the game plan is to roll them over. This one after 12 years becomes the backup.
Right. Okay. So the
And
answer
the
is
backup is kind of reserved for the Division Point area of the island.
yes. I'm aware of that. Those of us with a short walk to the firehouse are
That's right.
covered by the
Yeah.
old ambulance. I'm just saying it's that kind of circumstance that in some ways pervades some of the things on the list. So it's all right.
All right. What else do you guys have? Other discussion items?
I proposed, I moved the approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll second it.
Second.
I'm in favor. Are all in favor?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. What's the next item on the agenda after that?
Adjourn.
Okay.
4:00.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
So we have a meeting next Friday.
Yep.
We got stuff we talked about doing.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And we've got base camp, also known to Carol White and Herb and Chip as band camp.
Band camp. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where she got that, but whatever.
I'm Herb.
Yeah, that's right. Sooner or later.
Well,
All right.
thank you all.
See y'all.
All
Okay,
right.
Have a good
guys.
weekend.
Good to
Bye-bye.
see you all.
All right. See you.
Cheers.